President Trump, on the day he was inaugurated, January the 20th, signed a proclamation that was aiming at suspending the right to seek asylum for individuals arriving at the U.S.-Mexico border. We want to get an update and analysis, and luckily we have Kate Lincoln-Goldfinch to do it, immigration attorney, owner, CEO of Lincoln-Goldfinch Law in Austin, Texas, and you will find her at Lincoln G. Finch. Kate Lincoln-Goldfinch, welcome. Thanks for being on POTUS this morning.
Good morning, Tim. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm good. I hope your 4th of July was a splendid weekend.
Well, I'm in Central Texas, which is the site of that terrible flood. So it's been pretty sad around here, actually.
I know, but, we had actual information now that they just put out a statement that said that evidently the camp has confirmed that there were 27 campers and counselors dying in the flood. So this is definitely a tragedy, no question about it.
Yeah, it's really upsetting. I know people who are impacted, and you can't help but wonder what governmental decisions allowed something like this to happen. I know that's not the point of this interview, but I'm sure you guys will be touching on it.
Yeah, no question about it, aside from whether or not there were cuts in NOAA, but there's more of a conversation about whether or not officials in Texas had an opportunity to get a warning system in place, but they decided against it because it cost too much, and now we're measuring the cost in a totally different way.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah. Well, let's get back to our conversation about this asylum ban first. The president put it in place. What was it designed to do, and what did it consist of?
So the January 20th proclamation, it was almost a reset button on steroids that got us back to where we had been at the end of the first Trump administration, that was under Title 42, so a bit of a different reason, but essentially just shut down asylum processing, meaning anyone who comes to the border or to the point of entry is just not processed. They're rejected and sent back. And it was a very sweeping proclamation that essentially just canceled asylum is the basics of what it did. And that's a reason that we've seen some of the lower numbers along the border. And it also, in my opinion, really allowed the Trump administration to sort of check the border, as done, and then focus on the interior, which is why we've seen so much enforcement and family separation in the interior. So with this decision, this is a good decision, and it takes us back to the question of can Trump really shut down asylum at the border? And the judge held that no, he cannot.
How does that figure in now what the Supreme Court says about judges making decisions that have affect more than just in a particular jurisdiction, or does this not fall under that most recent Supreme Court decision?
Well, that decision was about nationwide injunctions, and an injunction is a temporary emergency measure put in place by a judge. It's not a full decision on the merits. So this case is not a temporary decision. This was a final decision. It was a 128-page decision, and in addition to deciding on the merits, Judge Moss found that there's a class here, which is the alternative to injunctions that the Supreme Court discussed. So this particular decision and case should not be impacted by that Supreme Court decision. But of course, the fact that the Supreme Court ruled the way that they did raises issues for how this appeal is going to go, because this decision by Moss will certainly go up to the D.C. Circuit and presumably also up to the Supreme Court. But it's pretty blatantly against the Immigration and Nationality Act, which of course is a law passed by Congress, which is something that a president cannot change by proclamation. So I would be surprised if the Supreme Court did not at least find along the same lines as Moss at the end of the day.
You note, Kate, that this is the judge found a class here. So who's involved in this class action lawsuit? Who's taking part in this?
That's a good question. I'm not involved in the lawsuit, and I don't know the expanse. As I've read, it's current and future potential class members. So that would be people who are already here. But I think the real question that I still need to dig into is how this applies to future applicants for asylum. So I don't want to give you a final answer on that today.
Okay. I did want to ask about how this is different from what was taking place under the Biden administration, which also did implement some more restrictive border policies. It restricted asylum. If you could say how this is different from what the Biden administration was doing.
Sure. Well, the Biden administration had to roll back Title 42. It was rolled back as applied to some children, and then there were some restrictions put into place on who could qualify for asylum, but at the same time, the Biden administration was doing things to allow for people to apply for asylum, like using the CBP One app or applying for entry under the parole programs for Cubans, Haitian, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans. All of those programs, which allowed for legal, orderly processing of asylum seekers, was also canceled out by the Trump administration, and this was just a complete ban on asylum applicants, and they're looking at canceling out asylum applications in the interior. And I think the good news, another good news item about this decision is that might slow down some of these aggressive tactics on the interior. You know, I've had a lot of clients, cases dismissed in court and picked up and detained, lots of families separated, and you know, up until this decision, the Trump administration is only putting, you know, their foot on the gas to try and get more asylum seekers who are in the interior, and by get, I mean detain and deport. So hopefully this decision will just slow all of that down, because it's been really, really horrific on the front lines, seeing what this is doing to people who are just applying for protection in the right way.
And let's ask about that. Kate Lincoln-Goldfinch, with an immigration attorney, is there a typical person seeking asylum who's coming across the border? And I'm assuming this doesn't apply only to people coming across the Mexican-U.S. border. I mean, this is an overall ban on asylum. Is that correct?
Yes, this is an overall ban on asylum. I mean, that is what the Trump administration has been doing, is overall banning asylum. But I can tell you, I mean, I'm in Texas, and the people who, you know, it fluctuates over the years depending on what's going on globally. But as of late, we've seen a lot of political refugees from Venezuela, from Cuba, from Nicaragua, people fleeing gang violence from Central America, Honduras, and Mexico. And these people are fleeing, you know, the very regimes, the very oppression, very crime that Trump accuses them of. And that's one of the things that's been so frustrating with the rhetoric, is that the vast majority of asylum seekers have committed no wrongs. They are not criminals. They just want to come here and protect themselves and their family like any of us would do. And it's real easy to see that when you work with them on a daily basis. But the rhetoric coming out of the Trump administration, accusing all of these people of being criminals, is very loud, you know, and it's persuasive to a lot of people.
So what happens next? I'm assuming an appeal by the Trump administration. Is that right?
Right. This will be appealed to the D.C. Circuit and then probably also to the Supreme Court. The ruling was stayed. It was issued on July 2nd, and it was stayed for 14 days. So we have just about another week to see how it will be implemented and whether the Trump administration will fully follow the order, which I think is also a question right now.
All right. We will watch and see how it progresses. Kate Lincoln-Goldfinch.